Alrighty everyone, welcome back. It is now March 14th of 2023, and as we get closer to the third episode of The Mandalorian Season 3 that debuts in just hours from now, by the way, we also have John and Dave getting ready to announce a lot of other big projects at Star Wars Celebration by this April, also at D23 that takes place later in the year. This is Mike Zero. Subscribe if you're new and like this video to see future Star Wars updates. I'm also on Twitter at Mike01. I thank you all so very much for the great and kind support. Now, given that we have a lot of things happening at the same exact time between George, John, Dave, and other creators coming on board over at Lucasfilm, Kathleen Kennedy's been a lot more vocal and direct with the fandom about her shows such as The Acolyte and Skeleton Crew, and her stance on the franchise and where it's all going. Now, as we talked about this just a couple of days ago, John and Dave are taking over roughly 40% of The Acolyte itself, for starters, to kind of aid and fix elements of the show. Will it necessarily fix the entire show? Most likely not, but it is an attempt by Disney to at least make it a somewhat decent installment to release on Disney+. We'll talk about that more later. Now that brings us to what Kathleen Kennedy recently had to say about what has been going on with her stance on Star Wars, what she thinks about George Lucas, and the overall fandom. And as you all know, Kathleen Kennedy always has problems and always has some kind of grudge against the fans. I mean, let's just face it, this is something that she always talks about, how she's very much against the fandom in today's day and age, and how she wants to literally create a new fandom, which is why Acolyte and Skeleton Crew are going to be very different, theme-wise, in comparison to anything else Star Wars. So let's tap into this. Now, with Kathleen Kennedy still having trouble with The Acolyte, and now John and Dave stepping in to help around 40% of the series to fix. However, in a recent interview that Kathleen Kennedy got involved in, she went on to talk directly to the fandoms by stating the following when promoting The Acolyte and Skeleton Crew. It's our job here at Lucasfilm to expand well beyond what fans want and to provide them with something new that fans, of course, and that doesn't need to cling to the old. The problem I see with this fandom right now is that they are too focused on George's work, and to me that is damaging to a brand as big as this, and that so much more can be done larger than one can imagine. To myself and Leslie Headland, we believe that George's philosophy is flawed, as one of the philosophies used in Star Wars that has been for over 40 years for this franchise, and that it only creates issues within the fandom. The answer is to use real-world conflicts happening today, right now, and how we can apply that to Star Wars to make it a suitable franchise for everybody, and for it to be relatable to everyone at the same exact time by exploring all these different philosophies. Now, let me just stop here for 1 second about what Kathleen Kennedy is saying, is that obviously she is putting George Lucas on full blast here, saying that his work does not matter, saying that his work is obsolete, and that Star Wars was never really all that expansive. And you know what? That's completely false. It is. Star Wars never needs to rely on what's happening right now in the world. It's all about mythology, it's about things in history that can be used and applied to the franchise. It doesn't necessarily have to take every single element of what's happening in the world right now at this very specific moment all at once. Because that's when you kind of lose focus on the story, that's when you lose focus on character development, and I think that this is why the Acolyte and Skeleton Crew are really shifting away from the regular tone of the franchise. And by the way, this is why Disney wanted John and Dave to come on board, to really kind of help aid those two shows because of how bad things have been going on with those two series, production-wise. There's been a lot of drama between the cast and the crew. It's been an ongoing problem. And the thing that really does, I think, stand out the most here about what Kathleen Kennedy is saying is that she herself is saying that fans, at the end of the day, are the source of the issue because they are clinging to George Lucas's philosophy. Now, I don't know about you guys, but to me, George's philosophy, it works. It's just perfect. We're talking about what Star Wars means at, a spiritual level, what it really means. in the center of it all. And you see that with the, with the Mandalorian season 2 mostly. You do see that with all the Mandalorian seasons so far. What they also did in, everything related to Rogue One, I thought that accurately portrayed his philosophy too as well. There's just something about George's work that makes Star Wars work. And when you shift away from that, I think you shift away from what Star Wars stands for. So on to the next thing, alright? She goes on to elaborate. The Acolyte and Skeleton Crew have been our outlet on expressing this, and though we have many other creators on with us for these stories to tell that departing from Lucas and his vision, which was only causing more problems for the fans. Whatever we have control over in these shows, we want to make the best of it by doing something that goes completely against the norm in this franchise and this ever-evolving brand. It's in my best interest to keep shifting away from Lucas's philosophy and his aesthetics of Star Wars in order to also give it a brand new look visually and thematically that's going to feel like a new franchise altogether. So that's the thing that I think really raises a lot of concern, is how Kathleen Kennedy says that these two shows are going to make Star Wars feel like an entirely new franchise. Look, Star Wars is Star Wars at the end of the day, right? You can like anything else, but don't make Star Wars feel like Dune, don't make Star Wars feel like Star Trek, and don't make Star Wars just feel like a regular sci-fi. George puts it best. At the end of the day, at least when it comes to the movies, and yeah, sure, the TV shows kind of stretch things beyond that a little bit, but at the end of the day, Star Wars is really a soap opera, or like he likes to call it a space opera, right? It's all about family at the end of the day, centered in the very middle of it all, and basically Kathleen Kennedy wants to depart from that very simple structure, alright? Now this is what she goes on to conclude. This is why I feel John and Dave aren't following the vision that they should, and that George's way is not the answer, as it only repeats the old and what already has been told. Now this is a very this is something that's very contradicting about what Kathleen Kennedy just said. So how she concluded things was by saying that George's philosophy is just about repeating the old and telling the same stories. But if you look at The Force Awakens, they literally did that. I mean, they practically retold A New Hope to an extent. I mean, Jakku is basically Tatooine with the opener. You had Rey, who is basically like the farm boy version of Luke on this planet that finds a new way out of the galaxy or into the galaxy. And you can also see things like there's another Death Star basically with Starkiller Base. There's a trench run in The Force Awakens. So that was all Kathleen Kennedy driven stuff. So, this is how she really usually says things. It's always contradicting, and I don't think she really believes what she says. I think that this is all to kind of just put pressure on George Lucas and the fans that do support him. And I also think that this is her, kind of reflecting on what's been going on with John and Dave getting control over some portion of the Acolyte now, so she feels like she has to defend herself a bit. But anyways, fill me in below in the comments, guys, what you all have to say about all of this in the comments, and if you guys did enjoy the content for today, make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel. I thank you all so very much for the kind support, and I'll catch you guys next time.
From night